everybody, this is Katje. I welcome you to my YouTube video channel this evening. I want to start out tonight by modeling for you this recent outfit that I purchased. I think I mentioned I had worn it once before, but I mentioned that it needed to be altered because the skirt was a little too large for my waist. So I had this dress, the skirt part of this outfit taken in a couple of inches so that it would fit me better, and now I'm much more pleased with the outfit. I'm very pleased with this result. So basically what I have here is kind of a mint pattern. It has a kind of a mint plaid pattern, and this is kind of a retro outfit, sort of harkens back to the late 50s, maybe the very early 60s, but maybe even more the late 50s, because of the cut of the dress and also the color scheme. I really like this dress. I think it goes well with these patent leather heels. So I just wanted to start out by modeling that for you, and you can see how it fits. And I really enjoy it. I think it's a nice outfit, especially for summer, late spring and summer. So I want to start out with that. And then what I want to do tonight is begin to read for you a story that I wrote a while back, and I thought about sharing this before, but I thought this evening I thought it would be a good time maybe to share the story. What I'm going to do, I think, is over the next 3 videos, I'm going to read 3 parts of the story. It's not that long, but I think it'll be better if I break it down. I promise you that the story is not about synchronicity. I promised you that I wouldn't get into that. This is a story that was inspired by my experiences where I grew up in Tennessee, but it isn't based on real events, except very, very loosely. It's inspired by something that happened, but then I took a lot of poetic license with that in the writing of this story. So what I'd like to do is just read the first part of this story for you. The name of the story is Blips, where I mean blips in the sense of like blips on a radar screen. So that's the name of the story. So tonight I will read the first part for you, and then over the next couple of videos I'll read the next 2 parts, and I hope that you enjoy it. So here's the story. Whenever Addie spoke with Ruth Ramey on the phone, she lounged on the sofa and wound the extra long spiral extension cord from her ankles to her shoulders, leaving just enough slack for her right hand to clutch the receiver to her lips. Today they were talking about the county fair. "What time are you and your mom going to pick me up?" "Around 11, Addie said. She'll drop us off at the gate. We can go through the prize, livestock, and produce barns to the midway and the concert. Since it's not a school night, my dad will come get us. What are you going to wear?" "My new boots, embroidered jeans, a nice shirt. Also, that necklace my aunt brought me. What about you?" "I don't know yet." A shadow fell over the sofa. Addie craned her neck to see her mother standing in the amber late afternoon light streaming through the picture window. She was wearing her favorite sundress, the one with the tiny cherry print and patent leather pumps that matched her purse. Her iron gray hair was pulled back into a precise bun. "We're almost done, Mom." "Well, hurry up, please. It's getting late and we still need to have supper. You look like Isaac after Abraham tied him up and laid him on the pyre. You're probably cutting off your circulation too." She arched an eyebrow. "If you get dressed now, we can stop at Burger Chef first." Addie told Ruth bye and unraveled the cord, then hung up and dashed to her room. Since her parents' death in a car accident when she was 7, Ruth had lived with her aunt and uncle and their 3 daughters in a clapboard house at the southern end of the fertile valley sprinkled with angular barns and brick churches. It was the last farm before the rural 2-lane climbed into the blue-green mountains along the Tennessee-North Carolina border. Between the Ramey place and the state line, the 2-lane intersected several smaller gravel or dirt roads wandering deeper into the back country where the mountain people made their homes in shabby double-wides or rickety shacks that squatted on stilts like rangy creatures about to hop away at any moment. Addie was afraid of the mountain folk. Once, she had gone with her father to deliver some groceries from their church. The rocky soil up there was so poor that nothing grew except for a few scraggly tobacco plants. No one answered the trailer door when they knocked, so they left the bags on the concrete slab that served as a front porch. Somewhere out in the woods, Addie had heard a high-pitched, vicious laugh that made her flesh crawl. Fortunately, the fairgrounds lay in the opposite direction, north toward Johnson City. Addie and her mother pulled into the driveway promptly at 7 that night. Ruth was waiting outside the front door. She wore soft gray boots and a cotton blouse that glowed faintly in the early September dusk. Her long and straight jet black hair was tied back into a ponytail, and the tiny silver ankh twinkled against the tanned skin of her throat as she slid into the back seat beside Addie. On the way to the fair, they picked up the thread of their earlier conversation. "I hate chemistry," Addie said. "How come?" "Mr. Stahl is okay, and I like it when we test water samples from the river for contamination and other stuff like that, but balancing equations gives me a headache." "You love the river," Ruth said. "It's so pretty out there," Addie answered. Ruth's face was invisible in the dark car, her voice hushed and almost reverent as she said, "Mr. Stahl and you and me and our experiments and the equations we have to balance to understand them are all part of the river becoming aware of itself so that it can be healed. If you really love the river, you shouldn't hate chemistry." Addie nodded. That was Ruth. She could take a sharp and bothersome thing from you and give it back to you so round and smooth that you could almost hold it in your hands. Mrs. Quilling dropped the girls off at the gate to the fairgrounds. Addie and Ruth paid admission at the ticket counter and immediately entered a long pavilion lined on either side with stalls of bleating calves, snorting hogs, and wizened goats flicking their stubby tails as they stared at the people passing by. There was a healthy stink of fresh manure. The next pavilion featured table after table displaying prize-winning tomatoes, cucumbers, squash, pumpkins, watermelons, cakes, cookies, and pies. Near the far end, a sudden gust of wind blew the blue ribbon for Best Blackberry Cobbler onto the sawdust floor. Ruth picked the ribbon up and carefully retied it to the handle of the cast-iron Dutch oven, holding the cobbler before she and Addie walked out onto the raw and muddy midway. They bought cotton candy from a skinny woman with frizzy hair and the same shade of pink and had a badly bruised lip. They were playing ring toss at a booth run by a man in overalls who reeked of whiskey and kept wiping his sweaty forehead with a dirty rag as he leaned against the wall of wickedly glittering stiletto knives. The air reverberated with the wild whirring and clanking of amusement rides intermingled with the riders' gleeful screams. In a plywood booth not far from the concert yard, a bearded young man wearing snakeskin cowboy boots, Levi's, and a black t-shirt sold chances to win a stuffed animal by popping 4 balloons in a row with darts at 25 cents per turn. After several tries, Ruth still couldn't hit all 4 balloons. It was only after the carny let her have a couple of extra free throws that she finally did, and selected a panda bear he promised to hold for her until she was ready to lead. Addie was put off by the carny. He smiled too much and kept his Coors cap pulled low enough to hide his eyes in the shadow of the brim. He seemed as rootless as one of the mountain folk, except that instead of a shack, he probably lived in a van and followed the Ferris wheels from Florida to West Virginia and back again all summer long. Addie's father had often said that his respectable clients who owned farms in the valley would hang him if he ever sold insurance to hillbillies or carnies because they would drive everyone else's premiums through the roof. The girls left the dart-throwing booth and headed over to the concert area. They found seats on a set of metal bleachers that had been erected in front of the stage where a local country band was already playing. Addie listened to the sad, twangy music for a while before her attention drifted to the older teenagers who were milling around and flirting in the grassy expanse between the bleachers and the stage. To the right, a chain-link fence separated the concert area from a large pasture adjacent to the fairgrounds. In the blackness around the fence, she could see the red tips from dozens of burning cigarettes bobbing like a swarm of angry fireflies. Every year, mountain folk came to the pasture to smoke and enjoy the show without having to pay admission. A deputy sheriff stood just inside the fence, keeping an eye on them and a hand near the handle of the pistol at his hip. The concert lasted an hour. When it was finished, Ruth returned to the plywood booth to fetch her prize, while Addie went to the payphone across the midway to call her father, who was working late at his office a couple of miles away in town. She hung up and turned around to see the carney bent intently over Ruth's outstretched hand as if he were reading her palm. Addie realized that he was writing something down. She quickened her pace as he was smiling again, and handing Ruth the stuffed bear. She clutched it to her chest and hurried toward Addie. "What was that?" Addie said. "Nothing," Ruth said, her voice low and flat. "He just gave me his number so we could talk." "We'll talk." They walked a few steps in silence. "Addie, please don't tell anyone." "Okay, but be careful. Promise?" "I promise." A clown wearing smeared makeup in a dunking stall was shouting hoarsely at a scowling man who threw baseballs at the tin bullseye attached to the side of the stall. After the clown got dunked a few times, the girls continued onto the parking lot outside the entrance gate. Addie's father was waiting for them, and they piled into the car. As he drove, he listened to their account of what they had seen and done before he embarked on a long monologue about the Roman origin of fairs, how dunking humans was better than baiting bears, the way they had in the Middle Ages, and why a fair wasn't the same thing as a circus. For once, Addie was grateful for her father's long-windedness, since it took her mind off what had happened between Ruth and the carney. It was almost 11 when Ruth's house flashed in the headlights. Ruth gently squeezed Addie's hand, then got out and ran all the way to the front door where the porch light was still on. Later, when Addie was finally home in her own bed, she turned her transistor radio to a frequency at the end of the dial where there was no station, and laid the device on her pillow so that she could listen to the whisper of static beside her ear. The white noise always lulled her to sleep. Then an odd moment came when she didn't know whether she was still awake or dreaming. Through the static, she heard what she thought was a series of low growls, no audible words, only the harsh snarling of something alone and enraged at midnight. So that's the first part of the story, Lips, and I will leave you with that for this evening. Let me put my phone away, and in my next video, if I have the opportunity to make it, I will then read for you the second part of the story, which I hope you enjoy. And once again, let me just take a turn in my late 50s miniskirt and top. I like to call this the split decision because it has the bared midriff, which is very nice and sexy, I think. So until next time, this is Katje. Thank you, everyone, for joining me and spending a little bit of your time with me this evening. I wish everyone, as always, a peaceful and a restful good night. Until next time, this is Katje. Bye-bye.